The wind tasted of iron and dust. Wyatt Blackwood stood at the mouth of the Blackwood mine, a gash in the ochre hillside that swallowed sound as much as light. 3 generations of Blackwoods had coaxed silver from this rock, and for 100 years the mine had been the town's lifeblood. Swite and his family's now. It was a tomb, a reminder, and, very soon, nothing at all. He hadn't been down in years, not since he clenched his jaw, the familiar ache settling under his eyes. The timbers were gray, skeletal against the fading afternoon sun. The air, even up here, carried the cold, damp breath of the mountainous core. He ran a calloused hand over the weathered wood of the support beams, feeling the splintered grain under his fingertips. They'd been his grandfather's, strong then, but now, compromised. Everything was compromised. Redemption, Nevada, wasn't much to look at. A cluster of tired buildings clinging to the edge of the Great Basin, its glory days long since mined away. A single gas station, a diner, the dusty sheriff's office, and a scattering of houses, most in varying states of disrepair. His house, the Blackwood house, was clinging on by a thread, threatened by the same slow rot that was consuming the mine. A flash of her smile, bright against the gloom. Sarah wearing his worn flannel shirt, a smudge of dirt on her cheek, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she teased him about his beard. She loved this place, this wild, unforgiving landscape. Said it reminded her of her own grandmother. As stories, tales of hardship and resilience, he hadn't understood then. He understood now. It wasn't the silver that held the memory of her. It was the Tumple's asterisk. He squeezed his eyes shut, the image almost unbearable. The roar, the shudder, dust like a biblical plague, the frantic, useless scrabbling. He remembered the weight of the rescue teams, their grim faces, the vacant stares of the men who spent 3 days digging, only to find nothing. The official report had called it a localized cave, in a naturally occurring fault line, unforeseen, unavoidable. He called it a betrayal, a chasm opening up and stealing the only light in his life. He tried to keep the mine going, fueled by grief and a stubborn refusal to let her death be in vain. But the vein had played out years ago, and the costs of maintaining the increasingly unstable tunnels had become crippling. 3 months. That is all he had left, 3 months before the bank took everything. The mine, the house, his history. He unfolded the geological survey, the thin paper crackling in the wind. Dr. Eris Thorne, a name he vaguely recognized from some university in Reno, had been hired by a prospective investor, a shadowy outfit based out of Las Vegas, who quickly lost interest when presented with the mine's dismal prospects. Thorne, however, hadn't insisted on completing his survey and sent Wyatt the report out of professional courtesy, or so the accompanying letter had read. Wyatt hadn't put much stock in it. Geological surveys were expensive fantasies for men who didn't understand the earth. But desperation, he discovered, had a way of lending credence to even the most improbable theories. The report indicated a geological anomaly, a subsurface formation that could indicate a previously undetected vein of silver. A slim possibility, Thorne had cautiously worded it. A long shot. The formation was deep, obscured by a complex network of fault lines and unstable shale. Digging would be difficult, dangerous, even, but the potential reward enough to pay off the debt to restore the Blackwood mine, to finally, maybe, start to rebuild something. He refolded the report and tucked it into his breast pocket, the paper a small, fragile promise against his heart. He checked his gear. A worn leather satchel containing a rock hammer, a chisel, a magnifying glass, a battered canteen, and a small, tarnished silver locket containing a picture of Sarah. She was smiling, bathed in sunlight, holding a sprig of wildflowers. He hadn't opened it in months. He selected a spot about 50 feet inside the mine entrance, near a section where the shale looked particularly fractured, an area marked as Zone 4 on Thorne's diagrams, a place he deliberately avoided in the past, too risky, even then. But risk was all he had left. He set to work, the rhythmic clang of his pickaxe echoing in the cavernous space. The dust swirled, coating his skin and clothing, filling his lungs with the metallic tang of decay. Each swing was an act of defiance, a refusal to surrender to the inevitable. He worked steadily, methodically, chipping away at the shale, the air growing thick with the smell of damp earth and rock dust. Sweat stung his eyes and his muscles screamed in protest, but he pushed on, ignoring the familiar tremor in his hands. He'd done this all his life. He knew the feel of the rock, the subtle shifts in density, the faint glint of fuel. He paused, wiping his brow with the back of his forearm. The silence descended, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water from the ceiling. He listened, straining to hear anything, any indication of what lay beneath. Just the mountain breathing. He resumed his work, his pickaxe striking the rock with renewed force. He concentrated on a particularly stubborn layer of shale, imagining the silver vein hidden beneath, a glittering reward for his years of toil and loss. Then, it happened, the pickaxe struck something hard. Not the dull thud of rock, not the brittle shatter of shale. This was a different sound altogether, a high-pitched ring, a metallic resonance that vibrated through the pickaxe handle and up his arm. It wasn't the sound of silver. It wasn't a sound he'd ever heard before. He stared at the exposed rock face, his heart hammering against his ribs. The sound had been unnatural, almost artificial. He dropped to his knees, brushing away the loose debris with his gloved hands. Beneath the surface, embedded in the shale, was a plate of metal, not a rusted piece of mining equipment or a forgotten tool. This was smooth, seamless, and dark, a dark, impossibly black metal that seemed to absorb the light around it. He ran his fingers over its surface, a cold, unsettling smoothness, unlike anything he'd ever encountered. He chipped around the edges, carefully widening the opening. More of the metal was revealed, forming a roughly rectangular shape. It was large, too large to be any part of the mine's original structure. It wasn't silver, it wasn't rock, it wasn't rock. It wasn't anything he recognized. A wave of unease washed over him. Cold and clammy, he felt a primal fear, a sense of something ancient and slumbering beneath the mountain, something that shouldn't be disturbed. He should stop. He should fill it back in, cover it up, and walk away. But he couldn't. The metal hummed faintly against his fingertips, a subtle vibration that seemed to resonate deep within his bones. It was calling to him, a silent, irresistible summons. And then the tremor started, not a violent shudder, but a low, rumbling vibration that traveled up through the ground. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and a fresh crack appeared in the support beam above him. He glanced up, fear constricting his throat. The mine was groaning, protesting he should leave. Now, but he was frozen, transfixed by the dark metal, by the humming, by the growing sense of dread. He reached for his rock hammer, his hand trembling. He had to know what was down there. He needed to know. He raised the hammer, his arm aching with the effort. He swung. The hammer struck the metal with a jarring clang, and the entire mine shuddered violently. A cloud of dust exploded outwards, engulfing him in darkness. And then, a new sound, a deep, resonant tone that echoed through the tunnels. A sound that promised not silver, but something far older and far more terrifying. The sound of who, wakening. The dust settled, revealing a sight that stole the breath from Wyatt's lungs. He coughed, waving a hand in front of his face, the taste of grit coating his tongue. It wasn't a vein, not exactly. It was more like a network, a dense, interwoven lattice of the black metal, snaking through the shale like frozen lightning. It pulsed with a faint internal luminescence, a slow, rhythmic throb that echoed the tremor that had just rattled the mine. He ran his hand along its surface again, the cold smoothness strangely compelling. It wasn't metallic in the traditional sense. It didn't feel like iron or silver or any other element he knew. It was other, alien. He'd spent his life understanding rock, reading its layers, deciphering its secrets. This defied understanding. He chipped away at more of the surrounding shale, revealing a larger section of the network. It extended deeper into the earth, branching out in complex patterns, disappearing into the darkness. The humming grew stronger, resonating in his chest, making his teeth ache. He retrieved his portable geological scanner from his satchel, a piece of equipment he hadn't used in years. Gathering dust, he'd inherited it from his father, who'd been a stickler for modernizing. Even as the mine clung to its antiquated ways, he switched it on, the screen flickering to life. The scanner usually displayed a spectrum of mineral compositions, identifying elements based on their spectral signatures. But this was different. The screen erupted in a chaotic jumble of lines and colors, a visual noise he'd never encountered. The machine beeped erratically, struggling to process the data. He adjusted the settings, recalibrated the sensors, tried different modes. Nothing worked. The scanner simply overloaded, displaying a string of error messages. "Impossible," he muttered, staring at the screen. "It is not registering anything I recognize." He tried a different approach, focusing the scanner on the surrounding shale, a known composition. It worked perfectly, displaying the expected readings. It wasn't the scanner, it was the metal itself. He switched the scanner to its energy signature mode, a rarely used function designed to detect subtle electromagnetic fields. The needle jumped off the scale. The reading was off the charts. An energy signature unlike anything he'd ever seen, exceeding any known mineral's capacity. It wasn't a static field. Either it fluctuated, pulsed, almost breathed. He switched off the scanner, his hands shaking. He'd unearthed something extraordinary, something that challenged everything he thought he knew about the Earth, about the universe. And a chilling thought wormed its way into his mind. Sarah hadn't died in a random cave. Had her death been connected to this? The following morning, a dust cloud announced the arrival of a black SUV, sleek and out of place, in Redemption's dilapidated streets. It parked in front of the diner, attracting the curious stares of the handful of locals nursing their coffee. A man emerged, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that looked like it cost more than Wyatt made in a year. He moved with an easy confidence, a polished charm that felt manufactured. "Wyatt Blackwood?" he asked, extending a hand. His grip was firm, cool. "Julian Vance, NovaTech Mining. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance, Dr. Aris Thorne." Wyatt shook his hand, wary. He'd heard of NovaTech, a sprawling conglomerate involved in everything from renewable energy to mineral extraction. They had a reputation for being aggressive, for steamrolling over small landowners in their quest for resources. "Dr. Thorne mentioned your mine had potential," Vance said, his eyes scanning the dilapidated buildings of Redemption. "He spoke very highly of the geological formations." "He sent me a report," Wyatt said cautiously. Leading Vance towards the mine, said there might be a new vein of silver. Vance chuckled, a low, smooth sound. "Silver is interesting, but we at NovaTech are interested in a broader range of possibilities. We're exploring opportunities in advanced materials. Energy storage, things that require unique geological resources." He paused, studying Wyatt. Dr. Thorne's report hinted at something truly unique down there. "Mr. Blackwood, something beyond silver." They reached the mine entrance, the dark maw looming before them. Vance didn't flinch, didn't seem bothered by the crumbling timbers or the lingering scent of decay. "I'd like to take a look around," Vance said, gesturing towards the entrance. Wyatt hesitated. He wasn't comfortable showing this man what he'd found. He didn't trust him, but he was in no position to refuse. He needed to understand what this metal was, and NovaTech had the resources to do it. "Be careful," he said, leading Vance into the mine. "It is unstable. There has been some recent shifting." He led Vance to the area where he'd made the discovery, carefully concealing the extent of the network with a strategically placed pile of shale. Vance's eyes, sharp and calculating, missed nothing. He circled the area, examining the exposed rock face. He didn't touch the metal, didn't ask about the humming. He simply observed, his expression unreadable. "Fascinating," he said finally. "Very fascinating indeed." Dr. Thorne was right. "This is atypical." "What exactly studies it?" Wyatt asked, unable to contain his curiosity any longer. Vance smiled, a disarming gesture that didn't reach his eyes. "That is what we're hoping to determine, Mr. Blackwood. NovaTech has the expertise and the technology to properly assess its potential." He turned to Wyatt, his voice dropping to a persuasive murmur. "I'm prepared to make you an offer, a very generous offer for exclusive rights to the Blackwood mine. A partnership, if you prefer. We can restore the mine." Revitalize redemption. We can bring prosperity back to this community. What kind of partnership? Wyatt asked, his suspicions growing. We'll handle the extraction, the analysis, the development, Vance said smoothly. You'll receive a significant percentage of the profits. And of course, we'll take care of all the financial burdens. The foreclosure won't be a problem anymore. It was tempting, more than tempting. It was a lifeline. But something felt wrong. The offer was too easy, too convenient. And Vance's evasiveness, his refusal to be specific about NovaTech's intentions, raised a red flag. I need time to think about it, Wyatt said, his voice tight. Vance nodded, his smile unwavering. Of course, take all the time you need, but I wouldn't delay too long. Opportunities like this don't come along every day. He handed Wyatt a card. Here is my contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out. As Vance left, Wyatt noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere. The few locals who had been cautiously observing now seemed to avoid his gaze. Whispers followed Vance's SUV as it rumbled down the street. He overheard fragments of conversation at the diner later that afternoon. NovaTech, they don't mess around. Heard they bought up all the land around Silver Creek, offered folks pennies on the dollar. My cousin said they have their own security force, real heavy-handed types. Redemption was a small town. Everyone knew everyone else's business. And the business of NovaTech mining was quickly becoming the only business worth talking about. That evening, as darkness settled over the mountains, Wyatt found himself drawn back to the mine. He needed to be near it, to understand it, to feel its pulse. He descended into the tunnels, his lantern casting long dancing shadows on the rock walls. He reached the area where he discovered the metal. The humming was louder now, almost a throbbing rhythm. He touched the surface, and a jolt of energy ran up his arm. It felt alive. He was about to head back to the surface when he heard voices, muffled, indistinct, coming from near the mine entrance. He extinguished his lantern and crept forward, moving silently through the darkness. He peered around a bend in the tunnel and saw Vance, standing outside the mine entrance, talking on his phone. He was speaking in a low, urgent tone, his voice barely a whisper. The anomaly is confirmed, Vance said. The Blackwood site, it is significant, beyond our initial projections. Wyatt strained to hear, his heart pounding in his chest. Yes, we've made contact with the landowner. He is cooperative for now. But he is asking questions. A pause, then Vance's voice even more hushed. Project Chimera is a go. Initiate Phase 2. Secure the asset. No loose ends. Wyatt froze. Project Chimera. Secure the asset. What was going on? He had offered a partnership, a way to save his home. But this sounded like something else entirely, something dangerous. He instinctively reached for the silver locket around his neck, the cool metal a small comfort in the growing darkness. He remembered Sarah's smile, her unwavering belief in the good in people. He was beginning to suspect that he'd stumbled into something far bigger, far more sinister than he could have ever imagined. And he had a feeling that his life and the fate of redemption now hung in the balance. The chill that settled over redemption wasn't just the evening air. It was a tightening in the gut, a prickle on the back of the neck that followed Wyatt everywhere Julian Vance had been. He avoided the diner, the general store, anywhere people gathered. He felt watched, assessed. The friendly nods he usually received were replaced with hesitant glances and averted eyes. NovaTech's presence had cast a long, suffocating shadow over the town. He needed answers, and he couldn't find them at the bank or the sheriff's office. He needed someone who knew the mountain, who understood its secrets. Someone like Silas Blackwood, Sibane, no relation, just a shared surname and a lifetime spent digging in these hills. Silas was a recluse, living in a dilapidated cabin high above the town, a ghost of the old mining days. Most folks considered him half mad, muttering about the old ones and things that sleep beneath the stone. But he also possessed the knowledge of these mountains that surpassed anyone Wyatt knew. After a hesitant climb up the winding trail, Wyatt found Silas whittling wood on his porch, his eyes as weathered and gray as the granite peaks surrounding them. Heard about the NovaTech man, Silas said without looking up, his voice raspy from years of dust and silence. They always come sniffing around when something interesting gets stirred up. Wyatt explained what he discovered. Omitting the details about Project Chimera and the hushed phone call, he showed Silas sketches of the vein, the strange energy readings. Silas listened intently, his gaze unwavering. "That ain't T-silver," Silas said finally, examining the sketches. "That is something else. I've heard stories, tales passed down from the old-timers. They said this mountain holds something old, something that shouldn't be disturbed." "What kind of stories?" Wyatt asked. His voice barely a whisper. "Stories of darkness, of power, of things that came before us." "They said the mountain breathes, that it remembers, that if you dig too deep, you'll wake something up." Silas paused, his eyes fixed on the distant peaks. "My grandfather always said the Blackwood mine was built on a cursed vein. He refused to go below a certain level, said it felt wrong." Wyatt felt a shiver run down his spine. He dismissed the stories as folklore, the ramblings of superstitious miners now. He wasn't so sure. "I've never seen anything like it," Wyatt said. "The energy signature, the way it grows. Silas raised an eyebrow. "I went back last night after Vance left. It is bigger. The network has expanded, spreading into the shale. It wasn't like that yesterday." Silas's face paled. "That ain't natural stone, don't grow." Asterisk, he grabbed Wyatt's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You need to leave it alone, boy. Seal it up, forget you ever saw it." "For your own good," Wyatt nodded, but he knew he couldn't. The mystery of the vein was too compelling, the potential too great. He thanked Silas and headed back down the mountain, the old man. Warnings echoing in his ears, NovaTech's pressure intensified over the next few days. Subtle at first, of a new security guard patrolling the edges of his property, a friendly offer of assistance with repairs to his house. Then it escalated. Two NovaTech representatives stopped by to discuss the benefits of a long-term lease, their smiles unwavering, their tone persuasive. Each encounter left Wyatt feeling more trapped, more isolated. He avoided Vance, but the man seemed to be everywhere, always appearing unexpectedly, offering a knowing smile, a casual observation. The flashbacks came unbidden, triggered by the constant anxiety. He saw Sarah again, her laughter echoing in the empty tunnels. He remembered the day of the cave-in, the feeling of complacency that had settled over the mine after years of safe operation. He remembered his father dismissing the concerns of old man Hemlock, the mine's veteran engineer, about the unstable shale in Zone 4. The same zone where he found the vein. Hemlock had warned of potential structural weaknesses, recommended additional support beams. His warnings had been ignored, dismissed as the paranoia of an old man. Now Wyatt wondered, had the cave-in been an accident, or was it something else? Had someone known about the instability, about the hidden danger beneath the surface? The questions gnawed at him, fueling his paranoia. He continued his secret analysis of the vein, driven by a desperate need to understand what he found. He worked under the cover of darkness, meticulously documenting its growth, taking samples, running tests with his antiquated equipment. Each night, the vein grew a little larger, the network branching out further, the energy signature intensifying. It was an impossible phenomenon, defying the laws of physics. It behaved like a living organism, expanding, adapting, phone-evolving, phone-morning. He returned to the mine to find the vein had grown exponentially. What had been a small network yesterday was now a sprawling lattice, covering a significant portion of the tunnel wall. The humming was almost deafening, the air thick with an oppressive energy. He ran his hand along the surface and felt a faint pulse, a rhythmic throb that seemed to synchronize with his heartbeat. He felt connected to it. He spent hours analyzing the new growth, his mind reeling. The metal was simply expanding outwards. It was altering the surrounding shale, chemically transforming it, integrating it into its own structure. It was growing too fast too, and it was changing the very fabric of the mountain around it. He returned to his cabin, exhausted and shaken, hoping to find a moment's peace. Instead, he found chaos. The door was ajar, the lock broken. Furniture was overturned, drawers pulled open, their contents scattered across the floor. His belongings had been rifled through. His research notes stolen, his father's geological tools missing. He scanned the room, his heart hammering against his ribs. The cabin had been ransacked, deliberately, meticulously, and then he saw it etched into the wooden floorboards. In the center of the room was a symbol, a single, spiraling line twisting inwards on itself. It wasn't a symbol he recognized, but it radiated an unsettling energy, a sense of ancient malice. He called out for Silas, his voice cracking with fear. No answer. He raced up the trail to Silas. His cabin, his legs burning with exertion. The cabin was empty, the door was unlocked, the pot on the stove still warm. As if Silas had simply stepped away for a moment. But his bed hadn't been slept in and his tools were gone. Silas was gone, and etched into the dirt floor of Silas' cabin, mirroring the one in his own, was the same unnerving spiral. He stood there, staring at the symbol, the realization dawning on him with chilling clarity. This wasn't about silver anymore. This wasn't about land acquisition. This was about something else, something far more dangerous, something that NovaTech was desperate to control. And now, he and Silas were caught in the middle of it. The spiral haunted Wyatt's waking hours, twisting and turning in his mind like a physical ache. He spent the next 2 days scouring libraries, historical societies, and forgotten corners of the internet, desperate to decipher its meaning. The symbol wasn't modern. It wasn't tied to any known religion or organization. It was older, far older. He stumbled upon fragmented references in obscure texts on geological anomalies, ancient mining disasters, and forgotten folklore. The spiral, it seemed, was a recurring motif in regions with unusual magnetic fields and unexplained geological formations. It appeared in cave paintings, petroglyphs, and the journals of early prospectors, often accompanied by warnings about disturbing the earth as sleeping giants. One particularly disturbing entry from a miner's journal dated 1888 spoke of a black vein discovered near Silver Creek, a vein that radiated an unnatural cold and caused strange dreams and unsettling visions. The journal abruptly ended mid-sentence, followed by a crude drawing of the spiral. A week later, the Silver Creek mine collapsed, claiming the lives of 30 men. Wyatt felt a cold dread creep over him. The similarities were too striking to ignore. The black vein, the spiral symbol, the catastrophic collapse. Was history repeating itself? He dug deeper into NovaTech's past, a task that proved surprisingly difficult. The company was a master of public relations, carefully crafting an image of environmental responsibility and community engagement. But beneath the polished facade, he found a pattern of reckless resource extraction, concealed environmental damage, and aggressive land acquisition. There were lawsuits buried in legal archives, settlements paid out of court, accusations of intimidation and coercion leveled by landowners who had refused to sell. The company had a habit of making problems disappear, of silencing anyone who stood in their way. He tried contacting Sheriff Brody, recounting his concerns about NovaTech's activities and the disappearance of Silas. The sheriff listened politely, his expression non-committal. "NovaTech is a big company, Mr. Blackwood," Brody said, his voice weary. "They bring jobs to this county. We don't want to make trouble for them based on hearsay and speculation." He tried the state authorities. He was transferred from department to department, met with bureaucratic indifference, and ultimately dismissed. It was as if an invisible shield protected NovaTech from scrutiny. He was on his own. The evidence pointing to foul play in Sarah's death began to accumulate, swirling around him like the dust storms that plagued the desert. He revisited the mine records, meticulously reviewing the safety reports, the geological surveys, the maintenance logs. He focused on the months leading up to the cave, in searching for any discrepancies, any overlooked details. He always accepted the official explanation, the narrative of a tragic but unavoidable accident. But now, he began to question everything. He found notes from his father detailing a minor vein of a strange, dark material discovered during an exploratory dig near Zone 4, the same area where he found the network. The notes were brief, almost dismissive, but they mentioned a peculiar energy signature and a recommendation for further investigation. The investigation never happened. He remembered his father's increasing preoccupation with cost, cutting measures in the months before the cave, in the pressure from investors to maximize profits, the dismissal of Old Man Hemlock's warnings. Had his father known about the vein? Had he ignored the potential dangers in pursuit of profit? And had that negligence contributed to Sarah's death? The questions tore at him, leeching away his strength, replacing grief with a burning rage. He was poring over the records late one night, the flickering lamplight illuminating the faded documents, when he noticed something unusual, a slight bulge in the wall behind the filing cabinet. He moved the cabinet, revealing a hidden compartment expertly concealed inside. Nestled among a stack of old ledgers was a journal, a small, leather-bound book, its pages filled with Sarah's familiar handwriting. He opened it, his hands trembling. It was her research journal, a meticulous record of her geological surveys, her observations, her thoughts. He hadn't known she kept one. The early entries were filled with technical details, detailed analyses of rock formations, descriptions of mineral deposits, but as he read further, the tone shifted. Sarah wrote about a growing unease, a feeling of being watched, a sense that something was wrong with the mine. She described an unnatural energy emanating from Zone 4, an energy that disrupted her instruments, caused headaches, and triggered unsettling dreams. She wrote about interviewing Old Man Hemlock, about his warnings regarding the shale's instability. "I am starting to feel like we re disturbing something we shouldn't be," she wrote in one entry, dated just weeks before the cave. "And there is a sense of ancient power beneath this mountain, something that has been sleeping for a long time. I fear we are about to wake it up." The last entry was dated the day before the cave-in. It was short, fragmented, filled with a growing sense of dread. "The energy is intensifying. I can feel it in my bones. Something is changing. I am afraid. I am really afraid." Wyatt closed the journal, tears streaming down his face. He wasn't just mourning Sarah's death. He was mourning the loss of the woman she had been, the scientist, the explorer, the woman who had sensed the danger and tried to warn them. He was interrupted by a knock at the door. He glanced through the window and saw Julian Vance standing on his porch, silhouetted against the moonlight. He opened the door, bracing himself. "Mr. Blackwood," Vance said, his voice smooth and controlled. "I thought we could continue our discussion." "I am not interested in selling," Wyatt said, his voice flat. Vance smiled, a predatory expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you are experiencing a difficult time. The loss of Mr. Silas Blackwood, the emotional burden of recent discoveries. It can be overwhelming." "What do you know about Silas?" Wyatt demanded, his hand clenching into a fist. Vance ignored the question. "NovaTech is prepared to make you a very generous offer. We're talking about enough money to secure your future, to rebuild your life. A sum that surpasses anything you could possibly imagine." I said no. Vance stepped closer, invading Wyatt's personal space. "Let us be realistic, Mr. Blackwood. You are a stubborn man, but you are also a practical man. You know you can fight this. NovaTech has the resources, the connections, and the determination to get what we want." He paused, lowering his voice to a menacing whisper. "Don't make this difficult for yourself. Don't force us to take steps that we both regret." He handed Wyatt a card, his eyes locking with his. "Consider this my final offer." As Vance turned to leave, he added, "And one more thing, it would be wise not to dig any further into the past. Some things are better left buried." Wyatt stood on his porch, watching Vance's SUV disappear into the darkness. He felt a chilling premonition, a sense that he'd crossed a line, that he was now a marked man. He went back inside, retrieved Sarah's journal, and clutched it to his chest. He wasn't afraid of NovaTech. He was afraid of what they were trying to hide. And he knew, with a terrible certainty, that the truth lay buried beneath the mountain, waiting to be uncovered. He opened the journal to a random page and his breath hitched. Tucked between the pages, brittle with age, was a meticulously drawn sketch. A sketch of the spiral beneath it in Sarah's unmistakable handwriting was a single, chilling sentence. It is not a symbol, it is a key. Sarah's words echoed in Wyatt's mind. It is not a symbol, it is a key. Say a key to what? He spent the next few hours poring over her journal, piecing together her fragmented research, her growing suspicions. She hadn't believed the black vein was a mineral deposit. Not in the traditional sense. She theorized it was a conduit, a natural pathway for a powerful unknown energy source, an energy that existed 40 beneath the earth. Predating human history, she'd written about anomalous magnetic fields, strange gravitational fluctuations, and a persistent, low-frequency resonance that seemed to emanate from the vein. She'd speculated it was a form of geothermal energy unlike anything known to science, an energy that could potentially revolutionize the world or destroy it. And NovaTech knew they hadn't been interested in silver. They'd been after this energy source all along, armed with this knowledge. Wyatt drove straight to the NovaTech staging area, a flurry of activity sprouting up outside the Blackwood mine. Heavy machinery was being unloaded. Generators were humming, and a team of technicians was swarming over the landscape. Julian Vance was directing the operation, his face radiating a cold, calculating satisfaction. "What is going on here?" Wyatt demanded, stepping out of his truck and confronting Vance. "You said you were conducting geological surveys. This looks like a full-scale extraction operation." Vance didn't even flinch. He simply smiled, a condescending expression that ignited a fury within Wyatt. "We've reevaluated the potential of the site, Mr. Blackwood. We've discovered a unique geological feature that warrants further investigation." "You're draining the mountain," Wyatt said, his voice trembling with anger. "Sarah warned about this energy. It is not safe." Vance's smile vanished. Sarah Blackwood was a well-meaning amateur. She didn't understand the implications of what she'd found. "We have experts here, professionals who know how to safely harness this energy for the benefit of mankind." Wyatt scoffed. "You've been covering up environmental damage for years. You don't care about benefits, you care about profit. You're going to destroy this mountain." "You're being irrational, Mr. Blackwood," Vance said, his voice dangerously calm. "I suggest you step aside and let us get to work. I'm calling the authorities." Vance's hand moved almost imperceptibly, and two burly security guards materialized at Wyatt's side. "I wouldn't do that," Vance said, his eyes glinting with menace. "You wouldn't want to cause any unnecessary complications." Wyatt knew he was outnumbered, outgunned. But he wasn't willing to back down. He had to stop them, expose their deception before it was too late. "You're playing with forces you don't understand," he said, his voice ringing with defiance. "This energy, it is not ours to control." Suddenly, the ground began to tremble. A low rumble echoed through the mountains, growing in intensity. Cracks appeared in the rock face, dust rained down from the ceiling, and the air crackled with energy. "What is happening?" Vance barked at one of his technicians. "The extraction process is triggering seismic activity," the technician replied, his voice panicked. "The mountain isn't stable enough to handle this kind of stress." "Increase the output," Vance ordered, his eyes fixed on a monitor displaying a fluctuating energy reading. "We're almost there. We need to stabilize the flow." The tremors intensified, becoming violent jolts that threw men to the ground. The extraction equipment groaned and shuddered. Struggling to maintain control, Wyatt saw his opportunity. He shoved past the security guards and raced towards the central control panel, determined to shut down the operation. Vance intercepted him, grabbing his arm in a vice-like grip. "You're a fool," Blackwood, Vance snarled, his face contorted with rage. "You're standing in the way of progress." They wrestled for control of the panel, a desperate struggle for the fate of the mountain. Wyatt landed a blow to Vance's jaw, sending him staggering backwards. But Vance was bigger, stronger, and he quickly regained his footing. He pinned Wyatt to the ground, his knee pressing into his chest. "This ends now," Vance hissed. Wyatt struggled to breathe, his lungs burning. He looked towards the mine entrance, and what he saw sent a wave of terror washing over him. The black vein was growing, not slowly, not gradually, but frequently expanding outwards, engulfing the surrounding rock. It wasn't just expanding. It was reshaping the tunnels, molding the stone into organic, pulsating formations. The walls were breathing, the ceiling was throbbing, and the air was filled with a strange, acrid scent, The mountain was reacting, defending itself. It was as if the vein had awakened and was actively transforming the mine into something. Alien. Wyatt kicked out, connecting with Vance's shin. He broke free and scrambled to his feet, stumbling towards the extraction equipment. He threw a switch, cutting off the power supply. The machinery sputtered and died, plunging the mine into darkness. The tremors subsided, but the energy in the air remained thick and oppressive. Then the vein pulsed. A blinding light erupted from the tunnel, illuminating the cavern with an ethereal glow. The light enveloped Wyatt, searing his eyes, burning his skin. He felt a surge of energy coursing through his body, a dizzying rush of sensation that threatened to overwhelm him. And then he saw it. The mine wasn't a mine anymore. It was something else. The tunnels had become veins, branching and twisting like the arteries of some colossal organism. The rock walls were covered in glistening, bioluminescent fungi. Strange, pulsating growths covered every surface, throbbing with an alien life. The entire structure had been transformed, reshaped, grown by the black vein. It was a horrifying, breathtaking vision, a glimpse into a reality beyond human comprehension. He felt himself falling, tumbling through a vortex of light and energy. He slammed against the rock wall, his body racked with pain. As darkness closed in, he heard Vance's voice, distorted and echoing, calling out his name. But it wasn't a voice he recognized. It was something else, something ancient and alien, and it was calling to him. Pain lanced through Wyatt's body with every breath. His ribs ached, his head throbbed, and a searing burn covered his left forearm where he'd brushed against the vein's energy. He pushed himself to his feet, leaning against a pulsing, bioluminescent wall for support. The mine was no longer the familiar network of tunnels he'd known all his life. It was a living organism, a labyrinth of glowing, throbbing passages that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves with every heartbeat. The air hung thick and heavy, saturated with an alien scent, metallic tang mixed with the earthy smell of decay, and something else, something ancient and indescribably foreign. The rhythmic pulse of the vein echoed through the tunnels, resonating in his bones, driving a frantic rhythm to his pulse. It felt invasive. He stumbled deeper into the transformed mine, guided by the faint emergency lights of his helmet and a desperate need to stop NovaTech. He navigated a network of ever-narrowing passages, the walls closing in around him, covered in a slick, pulsating membrane. He had to ignore the primal fear clawing at his throat. The unsettling sensation of being watched, of being sword-bite absorbed, died by the living rock. He found a makeshift command center, carved into a massive cavern near the heart of the vein. Monitors flickered with distorted images, displaying energy readings and geological schematics. NovaTech technicians, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow, worked frantically, oblivious to the danger that surrounded them. And there, at the center of it all, was Julian Vance. He was overseeing the operation, barking orders into a headset. His expression euphoric with triumph. He hadn't been injured, barely even shaken by the near collapse. It was as if he'd been expecting it. Wyatt activated his helmet's recording function and crept closer, hiding in the shadows. He had to gather evidence. Expose NovaTech's recklessness before it was too late. Energy levels are stabilizing, Vance reported into the headset. We're approaching critical mass. Prepare for full extraction. Excellent, a voice replied, distorted and static-filled. The client is eager to see results. They've authorized a significant bonus upon successful completion. Client, Wyatt whispered, his blood running cold. Who is the client? That is classified, Mr. Blackwood, Vance said. As if reading his mind, he turned, his gaze sweeping the cavern, and locked onto Wyatt's position. So you've decided to join the party, Vance said, a cold smile playing on his lips. I was wondering when you'd show up. Wyatt stepped out of the shadows, his hand instinctively reaching for the pickaxe strapped to his back. You're weaponizing this thing, he accused, his voice raw with anger. You're going to sell it to the highest bidder, consequences be damned. Vance chuckled. Weaponizing, please. We're simply harnessing a clean, sustainable energy source. And as for the highest bidder, let's just say there are parties who recognize the potential of this technology and are willing to pay handsomely for it. He gestured to the monitors, displaying schematics of a device that was being assembled around the central vein. This isn't about powering homes, Mr. Blackwood. This is about power pure and simple. A power that will change the world. You're going to destroy it, Wyatt countered. This energy isn't meant to be controlled. It is going to destabilize the planet. Vance dismissed his concern with a wave of his hand. Hyperbole, fear-mongering. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Wyatt wasn't buying it. He continued to scan the monitors, searching for evidence to support his suspicions. He stumbled upon a hidden file, a collection of internal memos and geological reports. He began to scroll through the documents, his eyes widening in horror. They confirmed his worst fears. NovaTech had known about the vein's instability for years. They had ignored warnings about the potential for catastrophic collapse. They had deliberately suppressed safety reports. And it wasn't the first time. The files detailed a series of similar incidents at other NovaTech mining operations. Suppressed reports covered up accidents, and a ruthless disregard for human life and environmental safety. They did this before, he murmured, his voice barely audible. They knowingly put people at risk. He saw a report detailing a similar vein discovered near Silver Creek decades ago, the same mine mentioned in Silas's stories. The report described a rapid deterioration of the surrounding rock structure, followed by a catastrophic collapse. The incident had been officially attributed to a natural disaster, but the internal documents revealed the truth. NovaTech's reckless extraction practices had triggered the collapse. The spiral symbol was there too, sketched in the margins of the report, accompanied by a cryptic note. Warning: Sylvanate interference with the core will have unforeseen consequences. As he read, the tremors intensified. The cavern groaned under the strain. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The vein's pulse quickened, becoming erratic and violent. The structure is nearing critical failure, a technician shouted, his voice laced with panic. We need to shut it down, no, Vance roared. We're too close. We're on the verge of a breakthrough. Increase the energy flow. Wyatt knew he had to act and act fast. He lunged towards the control panel, intent on shutting down the extraction equipment. Vance intercepted him, knocking him to the ground. They grappled for control, their struggle echoing through the cavern. You're a misguided fool, Blackwood, Vance growled, pinning Wyatt beneath him. You don't understand the power we're about to unleash. I understand that you're willing to sacrifice everything for profit, Wyatt retorted, struggling to break free. He managed to land a blow to Vance's temple, stunning him momentarily. He scrambled to his feet and reached for the emergency shutdown switch. But it was too late. Vance recovered and pushed Wyatt away, his eyes blazing with fury. He slammed his fist onto a large red button, initiating the final phase of the extraction. The vein pulsed with an overwhelming surge of energy. The cavern radiated with an intense light, blinding and disorienting. The rock walls began to crack and crumble. The ground beneath their feet buckled and swayed. Wyatt knew the mine was about to collapse. He looked towards the heart of the vein and saw something that chilled him to the bone. A massive, pulsating chamber, bathed in an otherworldly glow. The core of the energy source. It was organic, alive, and growing at an exponential rate. He realized, with a terrifying clarity, that it wasn't just the mine that was in danger. The energy released from the vein could destabilize the entire region, potentially triggering earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and a cascade of catastrophic events. It is going to destroy everything, he whispered, his voice hoarse. He glanced at Vance, still desperately trying to control the energy flow, oblivious to the impending disaster. He knew he couldn't reason with him. He couldn't stop him. There was only one option left. He turned and began running towards the main shaft, towards the entrance to the mine. He had to collapse the tunnels, seal the vein, bury it under tons of rock and earth. It was a desperate gamble, a suicidal mission, but it was the only way to prevent NovaTech from unleashing a catastrophe upon the world. As he fled, he heard Vance's voice echoing behind him, screaming his name. But he didn't stop. He didn't look back. He reached the main shaft, his lungs burning, his muscles screaming in protest. He found the detonator, a series of explosive charges planted along the support beams years ago. A contingency plan for a major cave-in. He set the timer, a desperate prayer forming on his lips. He knew there was a strong chance he wouldn't make it out alive, But he couldn't let NovaTech succeed. He couldn't let the darkness spread. He closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable. Suddenly he paused, a chilling realization washing over him. He thought of Sarah, of her warnings, of her research. She hadn't been trying to harness the energy. She'd been trying to understand ID, and he dismissed it, blinded by his grief and his pride. Maybe there was another way, a way to contain the energy, to stabilize the vein. But there wasn't time. The timer was ticking. He only had seconds. He had to choose. Save himself or save the world. With a heavy heart, he pressed the detonator. The mountain shuddered. A deafening roar filled the air, and then darkness. The world dissolved into a cacophony of roaring thunder and shuddering earth. The detonator's signal rippled through the Blackwood mine, igniting the explosive charges with brutal efficiency. Wyatt braced himself against the support beam, knowing it was a futile gesture. The mountain was rejecting them, reclaiming its depths. The initial blasts echoed like the wrath of a forgotten god, collapsing tunnels, triggering landslides, and sealing off sections of the vein with tons of rock and shale. A wave of heat washed over him, followed by a choking cloud of dust. He squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the inevitable. He heard a scream, a desperate, animalistic bellow that cut through the chaos. It was Vance. Wyatt didn't open his eyes. He didn't need to. He knew Vance had been too close to the core, too consumed by his ambition to escape the avalanche of collapsing rock. Whether it was a swift death or a prolonged entombment, Wyatt didn't care. He'd done what he had to do. The explosions continued. A series of carefully orchestrated implosions designed to isolate and contain the vein's energy. Wyatt had hoped the process would create a stable, airtight seal preventing the energy from escaping. But the power emanating from the vein was immense, unpredictable. He wasn't convinced it would hold. The tremors gradually subsided, replaced by an eerie silence. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through the cracks in the collapsed tunnels. He coughed, his lungs burning, and slowly opened his eyes. He was buried but not crushed. A pocket of air had formed around him, protected by a tangle of fallen debris. He was injured, bruised, and battered, but alive. He began to dig, frantically clawing his way through the rubble. It took hours, but finally, he broke through to the surface, emerging into a world transformed. The mountainside was scarred and broken, a raw wound in the earth. A plume of dust hung in the air, obscuring the sun. The landscape was littered with debris, twisted metal, and the remnants of NovaTech's Operation Redemption was quiet, too quiet. As he stumbled towards town, he saw the faces of the locals, their expressions a mixture of relief and apprehension. Sheriff Brody was directing the rescue efforts, coordinating the search for survivors. There weren't many. NovaTech's security team had been largely buried in the collapse. Vance's body hadn't been recovered, presumed lost beneath tons of rock. The few survivors were being treated for injuries, their faces etched with shock and trauma. The town was safe for now. But it would never be the same. The Blackwood mine was gone, sealed forever. The dream of revitalization was shattered. But the nightmare had been averted. Days turned into weeks. The cleanup operation was slow and arduous. The dust settled, revealing the extent of the damage. The mountain stood silent, brooding, its secrets once again buried deep within its core. Wyatt remained in redemption, a reluctant hero. He helped with the cleanup, offered what solace he could to the grieving families, and tried to come to terms with the events that had unfolded. He found himself drawn back to the mountainside, to the site of the collapsed mine. He spent hours wandering among the ruins, searching for any sign of lingering energy, any indication that the vein had been successfully contained. He found nothing, or so he thought. One afternoon, while exploring a remote section of the mountainside, far from the main collapse, he noticed a faint glimmer in the sunlight. He approached cautiously, his heart quickening with a familiar sense of apprehension. He knelt down and brushed away the dust and debris, revealing a small vein of silver embedded in the rock. It wasn't like any silver he'd seen before. It had a subtle, almost imperceptible luminescence, a faint internal glow. The metallic structure was different, more intricate, more complex. He chipped off a small sample, examining it closely. It felt warm to the touch, radiating a faint energy. It was a trace, a whisper of the ancient power that had slumbered beneath the mountain. The vein wasn't connected to the main deposit. It was a new formation, a small, isolated pocket, but it was there, a subtle reminder that the energy hadn't been entirely contained, that the mountain was still alive, still breathing. He tucked the sample into his pocket, his mind reeling. He'd stopped a disaster, saved his town, but he hadn't destroyed the energy. Only suppressed it. It remained dormant, waiting. He walked back towards redemption, the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape. He was a changed man. The grief had faded, replaced by a quiet resolve. He had found a measure of peace, a sense of acceptance. He knew he couldn't escape the mountain's legacy. It was in his blood, in his bones. He would continue to watch over it, to protect it, to guard against any future attempts to disturb its secrets. As he reached the outskirts of town, he glanced back at the mountainside. A faint, almost imperceptible luminescence emanated from the ruins of the Blackwood mine, shimmering in the twilight. It was a subtle glow, easily missed, but it was there, a silent testament to the power that lay beneath, and a chilling promise that the story wasn't truly over. The mountain held its breath, waiting, and Wyatt Blackwood would be ready,